If you feel stuck right now, I want you to know something important. You're not broken. You're not broken. And you're definitely not incapable. What you're experiencing is a moment of pause before progress. And for many people, this moment becomes a prison, not because they can't move forward, but because they're waiting for permission, confidence, or clarity that only comes after they take action. Most people think they're stuck because they don't know what to do. That's not true. You're stuck because you've been thinking instead of moving. You've been waiting for certainty instead of creating momentum. And here's the truth most people never hear: clarity is not a prerequisite for action. Action is the prerequisite for clarity. Right now, your mind is overloaded. Too many options, too many opinions, too much pressure to get it right. And the more you sit there trying to figure out the perfect next step, the heavier everything feels. Your energy drops, your confidence fades, and suddenly doing nothing feels safer than doing something. But listen closely, your life does not change when you feel ready. It changes when you decide to move, even without confidence, even without a perfect plan. Progress begins the moment you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is one action I can take right now?" You don't need a breakthrough. You need movement. You don't need motivation. You need engagement. And once you take that first small, intentional step, something powerful happens. Your energy shifts, your identity strengthens, and that feeling of being stuck begins to disappear. So before you do anything else today, before you quit, before you scroll, before you talk yourself out of your potential, pause, take a breath, and get ready to move. Because the moment you choose action, everything starts to change. Feeling stuck is not a flaw. It's a signal for growth. And I want you to really hear that, because most people don't. Most people treat feeling stuck like a diagnosis, like a label, like proof that something is wrong with them. They say, "I'm stuck, so I must be failing. I'm stuck, so I must be behind. I'm stuck, so I must not have what it takes." But that interpretation is not only wrong, it's dangerous, because it turns a moment of transition into a moment of self-doubt. And self-doubt keeps people frozen far longer than confusion ever could. Think about this for a moment. At no point in your life did growth ever happen without discomfort. You didn't grow when things were easy. You didn't evolve when everything was familiar. Growth always showed up disguised as uncertainty, pressure, and questioning. Feeling stuck is often the sign that the old way of thinking, living, or operating no longer fits who you're becoming. It's not a dead end. It's a signal that an upgrade is required. But here's what most people do instead. They panic. They internalize the feeling. They start attacking themselves mentally. Why can't I figure this out? What's wrong with me? Why does everyone else seem to be moving forward? And the moment you make feeling stuck mean something negative about who you are, you stop listening to what it's trying to teach you. Because feeling stuck is information. It's feedback. It's your inner awareness saying the next level of your life can't be built with the same patterns you've been using. You don't feel stuck because you're incapable. You feel stuck because you're standing between who you were and who you're becoming. And that space, that in-between space, is uncomfortable by nature. There's no clear map. There's no guarantee. There's no familiar routine to hide behind. And for people who are driven, ambitious, and self-aware, that space can feel terrifying because you care, because you want more, because you know there's something else inside you that hasn't fully expressed itself yet. The problem isn't the feeling of being stuck. The problem is how quickly people try to escape it or suppress it. They distract themselves, they numb themselves, they scroll. They stay busy doing things that look productive but don't actually move their life forward. Or they wait. They wait for clarity, for confidence, for certainty, for the perfect sign that tells them it's safe to move. And while they're waiting, time keeps passing, energy keeps leaking, belief keeps eroding. But growth doesn't announce itself politely. It doesn't show up with a step-by-step plan. Growth shows up as tension, as restlessness, as dissatisfaction with the status quo, as a quiet inner voice saying, "There's more for you than this." Feeling stuck is often the first evidence that you're ready for something bigger. Not because you have it all figured out, but because you've outgrown what you've been tolerating. If you look back at your life honestly, some of your most important decisions probably came after periods where you felt lost, uncertain, or unsure of your next move. At the time, it felt uncomfortable. It felt frustrating. But in hindsight, you can see it clearly. That moment forced you to reassess, to raise your standards, to stop settling, to choose differently. That's what this feeling is trying to do now. It's asking you to pause long enough to recognize that the version of you who created your current results is not the same version required to create your next ones. Feeling stuck is also a call to responsibility, not blame, responsibility. It's life asking, are you willing to take ownership of what happens next, even without guarantees? Because staying where you are may feel familiar, but it's also costing you something. It's costing you energy. It's costing you belief. It's costing you self-trust. And deep down, you know it. That's why the feeling won't go away. That's why ignoring it doesn't work. That's why motivation videos alone don't fix it. This feeling is not asking you to make a massive, dramatic leap. It's asking you to tell the truth to yourself about what's no longer working, about what you've been avoiding, about where you've been playing small, staying comfortable, or waiting for permission. Feeling stuck often shows up when your external actions no longer align with your internal values. When you know you're capable of more, but your daily behavior hasn't caught up to that truth yet. And that internal tension, that's not a weakness. That's awareness. That's growth knocking on the door. The real danger is not feeling stuck. It's building an identity around being stuck. Saying, this is just who I am, instead of asking, who do I need to become next? Because the moment you label yourself as stuck, you unconsciously permit yourself to stop trying, stop exploring, stop engaging. But the moment you see it as a signal, everything changes. Now you're curious instead of critical. Now you're open instead of defensive. Now you're listening instead of resisting. You don't need to judge yourself for feeling this way. You need to respect the message. Something in your life needs to shift. Something needs to be redefined. Something needs to be let go of, or something new needs to be stepped into. And you won't discover that by beating yourself up. You'll discover it by paying attention, by asking better questions, by being willing to move before everything feels comfortable. Feeling stuck is often the moment right before clarity, but only if you respond with action instead of avoidance, because growth rewards movement, not perfection. And the people who eventually break through are not the ones who never felt stuck. They're the ones who refuse to let that feeling define them. They chose to treat it as a signal, not a sentence. Clarity comes from movement, not overthinking. That idea sounds simple, but it challenges one of the most deeply ingrained habits people have. From an early age, we're taught to analyze, to plan, to think things through before we act. We're told that smart people figure things out first, that confident people know exactly what they're doing, and that mistakes are something to avoid. So when life gets uncertain, when the next step isn't obvious, the instinct is to stop and think harder, to replay scenarios, to weigh options endlessly, to wait for the moment when everything finally makes sense. But here's what almost no one tells you: overthinking doesn't create clarity. It creates noise. It creates hesitation. It creates self-doubt. The mind left alone without action does not simplify things. It multiplies them. Every unanswered question gives birth to 5 more. Every imagined outcome creates another reason to hesitate. And before you know it, what started as a desire to get clear turns into paralysis. The truth is, clarity is not something you discover by sitting still. It's something you earn by engaging with life. It's forged in motion. It's shaped by feedback. It emerges when you step forward and let reality respond to you. Most people want clarity before they move, but high performers understand something different. Movement creates the information that clarity is made of. Think about how learning actually works. You don't learn how to ride a bike by reading about balance. You learn by wobbling, by falling, by adjusting. You don't learn how to communicate powerfully by thinking about what you might say one day. You learn by speaking, noticing what lands, and refining. Action gives you data. Stillness gives you speculation. And speculation almost always exaggerates fear. When you overthink, you're trying to solve the future using the past. You're relying on old experiences, old beliefs, old limitations to predict something that requires a new version of you. That's why thinking alone feels so exhausting. You're asking your mind to do a job it was never designed to do. The mind is a tool for processing experience, not replacing it. Without new input, it just loops. Overthinking also quietly erodes trust in yourself. Every time you delay action because you're not ready, you reinforce the idea that you can't handle uncertainty. Every time you wait for the perfect plan, you teach yourself that progress requires conditions you don't control. And slowly, without realizing it, you start outsourcing your confidence to circumstances. I'll act when I feel sure. I'll start when I know it will work. I'll decide once I'm confident. But confidence doesn't come first. It follows engagement. Movement changes your internal state. When you act, even imperfectly, your physiology shifts, your focus sharpens, your energy rises, your sense of agency returns. You stop feeling like life is happening to you and start feeling like you're participating in it again. That shift alone creates more clarity than hours of mental debate ever could. There's also a deeper reason why action produces clarity. When you move, you commit. And commitment simplifies things. It forces you to prioritize. It narrows your focus. When everything is theoretical, every option feels equally important. But when you take a step, the irrelevant falls away. The path begins to reveal itself not all at once, but one piece at a time. Most people don't need a master plan. They need a first move. Something small enough to do today, but real enough to matter. Because once you move, you stop asking abstract questions like, what should I do with my life? And start asking practical ones like, what did I learn from this? Or what's the next adjustment? Those questions are grounded. They're useful. They're solvable. Overthinking often feels productive because it feels busy. Your mind is working nonstop, but business is not the same as progress. You can be mentally exhausted and still be standing in the same place. Action, even in small doses, creates momentum, and momentum changes how you see yourself. You stop identifying as someone confused and start identifying as someone who is experimenting, learning, and adapting. It's important to understand that clarity doesn't mean certainty. It doesn't mean having all the answers. It means having enough direction to take the next step with intention. And that kind of clarity rarely shows up before you begin. It shows up because you began. There's also an emotional component here that people underestimate. Overthinking is often driven by fear of wasting time, fear of choosing wrong, fear of being judged, fear of failing. The mind tries to protect you by simulating outcomes, but in doing so, it keeps you stuck in imagined futures that haven't happened. Action brings you back into the present. And in the present, fear loses some of its power because you're dealing with what's real, not what's imagined. When you move, you also reconnect with your values. It's hard to know what matters most when everything stays hypothetical. But when you act, you feel alignment or resistance in your body. You notice what energizes you and what drains you. That feedback is priceless. It can't be accessed through thinking alone. Clarity is iterative. It's built layer by layer. Each action reveals something new, a strength you didn't know you had, a skill you need to develop, a direction that no longer fits. And that's not a problem. It's the process. Expecting clarity before action is like expecting strength before training. One is the result of the other. Many people say they're waiting for clarity when what they're really waiting for is reassurance. They want to guarantee that the path they choose will be safe, successful, and approved by others. But life doesn't work that way. Growth requires you to tolerate ambiguity, to move forward without applause, to trust that you can adjust as you go. When you understand that clarity comes from movement, something shifts. You stop treating indecision as a personal failure and start seeing it as a sign that it's time to engage. You stop trying to think your way into confidence and start acting your way into it. You realize that you don't need to see the whole staircase, just the next step. Action doesn't mean recklessness. It means intentional movement. It means choosing progress over perfection. It means being willing to learn in real time instead of waiting for a moment that may never arrive. And once you experience how quickly clarity follows action, you stop fearing uncertainty as much. You begin to trust the process. The people who move forward in life are not the ones with the clearest plans. They're the ones who are willing to move without clarity and let clarity catch up to them. They understand that thinking has a role, but it's not the starting point. Engagement is. And the moment you step into motion, the fog begins to lift, not all at once, but enough to keep going. Energy and identity matter more than perfect plans, because no plan in the world can save you if you don't have the vitality to act on it or the self-image to sustain it. Most people don't struggle because they lack strategies. They struggle because they wake up tired, disconnected, and unsure of who they are becoming. They spend their days searching for the right system, the right method, the right roadmap, believing that once they find it, everything will click. But the truth is, plans don't move people. People move plans. And the force behind that movement is energy and identity. Energy is not just about how much sleep you got or how busy your calendar is. It's about how alive you feel when you show up to your life. It's the emotional, mental, and physical fuel that determines whether you lean into challenges or retreat from them. You can have the most detailed plan imaginable, but if your energy is low, that plan becomes another source of guilt, another reminder of what you're not doing. Another unfinished document is sitting on your desk while life keeps moving forward. High performers understand this intuitively. They don't obsess over perfect plans. They obsess over managing their energy. They ask different questions. Not what's the perfect strategy, but how do I show up with strength today? Because when your energy is strong, you become resourceful. You adapt. You figure things out as you go. When your energy is drained, even simple tasks feel overwhelming, and every obstacle feels like confirmation that you're not ready. Energy also shapes perception. When you're energized, problems look like puzzles. When you're exhausted, the same problems look like threats. That's why two people can face the same situation and respond completely differently. It's not the plan that separates them, it's the state they're in. And most people underestimate how much their state determines their outcomes. Then there's identity. Identity is the story you tell yourself about who you are and what kind of person you are. It's the lens through which you interpret every experience. If your identity says, I'm someone who starts but doesn't finish, no plan will survive contact with resistance. If your identity says, I'm not disciplined, you'll unconsciously sabotage any system that requires consistency. Identity always wins over intention. This is why people abandon plans they were once excited about, not because the plan stopped working, but because it conflicted with how they see themselves. The behavior required by the plan didn't match the identity they were operating from. And when there's a mismatch, identity pulls you back to what feels familiar, even if familiar is unfulfilling. Perfect plans are seductive because they promise control. They make you feel safe. They give you the illusion that if you think long enough, you can avoid discomfort. But growth doesn't come from control. It comes from engagement, from showing up even when you don't feel fully prepared, acting like the person you want to become before you feel like them. Identity is not something you wait to discover. It's something you practice. Energy and identity are deeply connected. The way you see yourself affects how you manage your energy. If you see yourself as someone who is overwhelmed, you'll conserve energy in ways that limit you. If you see yourself as someone who is capable and resilient, you'll invest energy even when it's uncomfortable. And the more you act in alignment with that stronger identity, the more energy you generate. This is why small actions matter so much. Not because they're efficient, but because they reinforce identity. Every time you follow through on a small commitment, you cast a vote for the person you're becoming. Every time you show up when it would be easier to avoid, you strengthen the belief that you can be trusted. That belief is far more powerful than any detailed plan. Plans are static. Life is dynamic. No plan survives reality unchanged. But energy and identity allow you to respond to reality with flexibility. They allow you to pivot without panicking, to adjust without quitting, to learn without collapsing into self-doubt. When your identity is strong, feedback doesn't feel like failure. It feels like information. Many people say they're waiting for the right plan when what they're really lacking is alignment. They're living in a way that drains their energy and contradicts their values. They're saying yes to things that don't matter to them. They're neglecting their health, their boundaries, their sense of purpose. And then they wonder why no plan sticks. You can't outplan a misaligned life. Energy is created by alignment. When your actions reflect what matters to you, energy follows. When your daily behavior matches your values, motivation becomes less of a struggle. Identity becomes clearer. You don't have to hype yourself up as much because you're not constantly fighting yourself. The internal friction decreases. This is also why copying someone else's plan rarely works. It might look perfect on paper, but it wasn't designed for your energy or your identity. It was built from someone else's values, rhythms, and strengths. Trying to force it can make you feel inadequate when in reality the plan just doesn't fit who you are or who you're becoming. Instead of asking, what's the perfect plan? A more powerful question is, who do I need to be today? That question shifts your focus from external structure to internal standards. It invites you to consider how you want to show up, how you want to treat your time, and how you want to respond to challenges. When you get that right, plans become tools instead of crutches. Energy is also contagious. When you show up energized and engaged, you create momentum not just for yourself, but for others. Opportunities respond to energy. People respond to energy. Life responds to energy. A perfect plan executed with low energy rarely inspires support. An imperfect plan carried by strong energy often attracts resources you couldn't have predicted. Identity gives you staying power. When things get hard, when progress slows, when results don't show up immediately, identity is what keeps you moving. If you identify as someone who keeps promises to themselves, you keep going. If you identify as someone who grows through challenge, you don't interpret difficulty as a sign to stop. You interpret it as part of the process. This doesn't mean plans are useless. They matter. They provide direction, but they are secondary. They should serve your energy and reinforce your identity, not replace them. A simple plan executed with high energy and a strong identity will outperform a perfect plan executed inconsistently every time. When you focus on energy, you pay attention to how you start your day, how you transition between tasks, and how you recover from setbacks. When you focus on identity, you become intentional about the language you use, the standards you hold, and the commitments you honor. These things compound quietly, powerfully. Most breakthroughs don't come from sudden insights or flawless strategies. They come from sustained engagement, from showing up again and again as the person you've decided to be, from protecting your energy and acting in alignment with that identity, even when it would be easier not to. When you understand that energy and identity matter more than perfect plans, you stop waiting for ideal conditions. You stop postponing your life until everything is mapped out. You start building from the inside out. You prioritize how you show up over how things look on paper, and that shift changes how you move through the world, how you respond to uncertainty, and how you grow into what's next. Small actions create momentum and confidence, and this is one of the most misunderstood truths about personal growth. People often believe that confidence comes from big wins, dramatic breakthroughs, or major life changes. They think confidence arrives after success, after recognition, after everything finally works out. So they wait, they delay. They tell themselves, once I feel confident, I'll start. But confidence doesn't work that way. Confidence is not the cause of action. It is the result of it. And it almost always begins with something small. When you're stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure of yourself, big actions feel intimidating. Your mind immediately jumps to the worst case scenario. What if I fail? What if I look foolish? What if I choose the wrong thing? These thoughts make large goals feel heavy and distant. But small actions don't trigger the same level of fear. They feel manageable. They feel possible. And because they feel possible, you actually do them. That's where everything starts to change. Momentum is created when movement becomes easier than staying still. And the fastest way to create momentum is not by trying to overhaul your entire life, but by taking one small intentional step. That step might seem insignificant on the surface, but internally it sends a powerful message. I move when I decide to. That message matters more than the size of the action itself. Every small action you take is evidence. Evidence that you can follow through, evidence that you're capable of change, evidence that you're not as stuck as you thought. And the mind responds to evidence. It doesn't respond well to affirmations or wishful thinking, but it responds strongly to proof. When you take a small action, you give your brain proof that you can act. That proof begins to rewrite the story you tell yourself about who you are. Confidence is built through repetition, not intensity. It's not about doing something once in a dramatic way. It's about showing up consistently, even when the actions feel basic or unglamorous. Every time you keep a small promise to yourself, your self-trust grows. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Without it, motivation feels forced. With it, action feels natural. Small actions also lower the emotional cost of failure. When the step is small, the risk feels smaller. You're more willing to experiment. You're more open to learning. You're less attached to the outcome. This mindset is crucial because growth requires trial and error. If every action feels like it has to work perfectly, you'll avoid acting altogether. But when actions are small, mistakes become information instead of judgments. Momentum works like a flywheel. At first, it's heavy. It takes effort to get it moving. But once it starts turning, it carries its own energy. Small actions are what get the flywheel moving. One task completed leads to another. One conversation leads to another idea. One decision creates a sense of forward motion. And forward motion changes how you feel about yourself. When you're moving, even slowly, you stop obsessing over whether you're capable. You stop questioning every decision. You become engaged. Engagement shifts your focus outward instead of inward. Instead of constantly monitoring your fears and doubts, you're responding to real situations. That shift alone builds confidence because confidence grows when attention moves away from self-judgment and toward purposeful action. Small actions also build identity. Every action you take, no matter how small, is a vote for the type of person you believe you are. When you consistently take small actions aligned with growth, you begin to see yourself differently. You start to think, I'm someone who takes initiative. I'm someone who follows through. I'm someone who makes progress. That identity becomes self-reinforcing. You act because of who you believe you are, and you believe in yourself because of how you act. Many people underestimate the emotional impact of starting. Starting creates relief. It releases tension. It breaks the cycle of rumination. When you're stuck, your mind spins. When you act, your mind settles. Even a small action can reduce anxiety because it restores a sense of control. You're no longer waiting for life to happen to you. You're participating in it. There's also a physiological component to this. Action changes your state. Movement increases blood flow, sharpens focus, and elevates energy. That physical shift supports a mental shift. You feel more alert, more capable, more engaged. Confidence is not just a thought, it's a state. And states are influenced by behavior. Small actions create feedback loops. You act, you get feedback, you adjust. This loop is how progress is made. Without action, there is no feedback, only assumptions. Assumptions are often negative and exaggerated. Feedback is specific and useful. It tells you what's working and what isn't. And with each loop, Your confidence grows because you're learning how to navigate reality instead of fearing it. It's important to recognize that small does not mean meaningless. Small actions compound. What feels minor today can become significant over time. A daily habit, a consistent practice, a regular commitment. These things don't produce instant results, but they build something far more valuable than quick wins. They build reliability. And reliability is a form of confidence that doesn't depend on mood or motivation. People who wait for big actions often burn out quickly. They rely on bursts of motivation, which are unpredictable. People who focus on small actions build systems. Systems don't require constant motivation. They rely on structure and consistency. And consistency creates momentum that doesn't fade as easily. Small actions also make change sustainable. When you try to change everything at once, you overwhelm your nervous system. You trigger resistance. You make growth feel like punishment. Small actions respect your capacity. They allow you to grow without shocking your system. They make progress feel doable instead of draining. There's a quiet power in doing something every day, even when no one notices. That power comes from knowing that you're honoring your own commitment. Over time, that integrity becomes confidence. You don't need external validation as much because you trust yourself, and self-trust changes how you move through the world. You take more initiative. You recover faster from setbacks. You don't crumble when things don't go perfectly. Momentum also changes the perception of time. When you're stuck, time feels heavy and slow. When you're moving, time feels productive. You feel progress, even if it's incremental. That sense of progress fuels motivation naturally. You don't have to force yourself as much because you're already in motion. Small actions are especially powerful when you feel overwhelmed. Overwhelm is often caused by thinking too far ahead, by trying to solve everything at once. Small actions bring you back to the present moment. They narrow your focus to what you can do now. And what you can do now is always more manageable than what you think you need to do eventually. Confidence grows when you prove to yourself repeatedly that you can take action despite uncertainty. Not after uncertainty disappears, but while it's still there. Small actions allow you to practice courage in manageable doses. And courage, practiced consistently, becomes confidence. You don't need to feel ready to take a small step. You just need to be willing. Willingness is enough. Willingness leads to action. Action leads to momentum. Momentum leads to confidence. And once that cycle starts, it becomes easier to keep going. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. You have more control right now than you realize. And this truth is often hidden beneath layers of distraction, doubt, and misplaced responsibility. Most people walk through their days believing that their lives are primarily shaped by circumstances, by other people's decisions, by timing, by luck, or by systems they feel powerless to influence. They say things like, once things calm down, I'll focus, or when I get the opportunity, I'll step up, or if I had more time, money, or support, then I'd move forward. And without noticing it, they hand over their sense of control to forces outside themselves. But control is not about having authority over everything in your life. It's not about predicting outcomes or forcing results. Control is about influence. It's about choice. It's about recognizing that even in imperfect conditions, you still have agency over how you show up, what you focus on, and what you do next. And that level of control is almost always underestimated. One of the reasons people feel powerless is because they confuse control with certainty. They think being in control means knowing exactly how things will turn out. When they don't have that certainty, they assume they have no control at all. But certainty is rare, and waiting for it is a form of avoidance. Real control shows up in how you respond, not in how perfectly you can predict. Right now, you have control over where your attention goes. That may sound small, but it's foundational. Attention shapes experience. What you focus on expands in your awareness. If your attention is constantly pulled toward what's wrong, what's missing, or what you fear, your emotional state will reflect that. But if you deliberately choose to focus on what you can do, what you can learn, or what you can influence today, your sense of power increases. The situation may not change immediately, but your relationship to it does. You also have control over your standards. Standards are the behaviors you tolerate from yourself. They determine how you treat your time, your energy, and your commitments. Many people feel stuck not because they lack opportunity, but because their standards have slowly eroded. They accept distraction as normal. They accept inconsistency as inevitable. They accept dissatisfaction as part of life. Raising your standards doesn't require a dramatic announcement. It starts quietly with small decisions like how you begin your day, how you speak to yourself, or whether you follow through on something you said you would do. Control also shows up in the questions you ask yourself. Questions direct thinking. If you ask disempowering questions like, why is this happening to me? Or Why am I like this? Your mind searches for evidence of helplessness. But if you shift the question to, what's one thing I can influence right now? Or what's the next best action I can take? Your mind moves into problem-solving mode. That shift alone can change your emotional state within minutes. Another overlooked area of control is your response to discomfort. Discomfort is unavoidable in growth, but your reaction to it is a choice. You can interpret discomfort as a warning sign that you should stop, or you can interpret it as feedback. You're stretching beyond what's familiar. The same sensation can lead to withdrawal or engagement depending on how you frame it. And framing is within your control. Many people believe they'll feel in control once life becomes easier, but it works the other way around. Life feels more manageable when you start exercising control in small, consistent ways. Control is built through practice, not granted by circumstances. Each time you choose to act instead of avoid, to engage instead of withdraw, you strengthen your sense of agency. You also have control over your environment to a greater extent than you think. Not total control, but influence. You can choose what inputs you allow into your mind, what you watch, what you listen to, who you spend time with. These inputs shape your beliefs, your mood, and your expectations. If your environment constantly reinforces limitation, fear, or passivity, it becomes much harder to feel empowered. Curating your environment is not selfish, it's strategic. Control shows up in how you interpret setbacks. A setback can be seen as proof that you're not capable, or it can be seen as part of the learning curve. The event itself doesn't determine your trajectory. The meaning you assign to it does. Meaning making is a powerful form of control because it influences whether you persist or quit, whether you grow or retreat. There is also control in how you manage your energy. You may not control how much time you have, but you influence how you use the energy within that time. When you neglect rest, nutrition, movement, or boundaries, you weaken your capacity to act. When you take responsibility for your energy, you increase your ability to respond effectively to challenges. Energy management is not a luxury, it's a form of self-leadership. Another area of control that's often ignored is language. The words you use internally and externally shape your perception of reality. Saying, I have to versus I choose to may seem subtle, but it changes how empowered you feel. Language can trap you in victimhood or remind you of your agency. Choosing empowering language is a skill, and like any skill, it improves with practice. You also have control over your willingness to begin again. Many people feel stuck because they believe it's too late, that they've wasted time, or that past mistakes define them. But the ability to restart, to re-engage, to recommit is always available. Control is not erased by past choices, it's exercised in the present ones. The present moment is where control lives, not in regret or anticipation. Control doesn't mean everything will go your way. It means you take responsibility for your part. It means you stop waiting for permission to act in alignment with what matters to you. It means recognizing that while you may not control outcomes, you do control effort, intention, and integrity. And those things compound over time. When people say they feel out of control, what they often mean is that they feel overwhelmed by the scale of what they think needs to change. They look at the entire mountain instead of the next step. But control is most accessible at the level of the next action. Not the whole plan, not the final result, just the next step you can take with intention. There is also control in choosing patience. Patience is not passivity. It's the decision to keep showing up without demanding immediate results. It's the discipline of staying engaged even when progress feels slow. That choice requires strength, and it reinforces a sense of inner control that isn't dependent on quick wins. Control grows as you use it. The more you act in alignment with your values, the more confident you become in your ability to handle whatever comes next. That confidence is not loud or arrogant. It's steady. It's grounded. It comes from experience, not from hype. You don't need to control everything to move forward. You need to control enough to begin. Enough to take responsibility for your attention, your standards, your actions. Enough to stop outsourcing your power to circumstances. When you recognize how much influence you actually have, even in small moments, the feeling of being stuck begins to loosen its grip. Right now, you can choose to engage instead of delay. You can choose to act instead of waiting. You can choose to respond with intention instead of habit. Those choices may seem small, but they are the building blocks of a life that feels directed rather than dictated. And that sense of direction comes not from controlling the world, but from reclaiming control over yourself, one decision at a time. If you're still here, take that as a sign that something in you is ready to move. You don't need to have everything figured out, and you don't need to feel fearless. You just need to choose one action and take it with intention. Momentum starts the moment you stop waiting and start engaging. So don't overthink what comes next. Decide, move, and remind yourself every single day, think less, act now.